So, um, on behalf of our Honorary Herald of the Society, Dr. Antonio Cabañas, I welcome you to the third annual Heraldry Ireland lecture of the Genealogical Society of Ireland. And today's lecture is entitled The Heraldic Collections from Medieval Times to the Digital Age. And it's given by Dr. Ralf Hartemink. He has a Master of Science and a PhD from Wageningen University in the Netherlands, where he works as a senior lecturer. And he first became interested in heraldry over 40 years ago when he was in primary school. His special interest is in civic heraldry. In the 1990s, he started drawing Dutch municipal arms on a computer, which was very advanced for the time. And in 1995, he began his website called Dutch Municipal Arms. But this has grown into an important site called Heraldry of the World, which is now 30 years old this month, and it's the oldest and largest active heraldry website. He collects civic heraldry books and items of interest, and his library has more than 1,200 books about civic heraldry, plus thousands of collectible items. So both the heraldry of the world and his collections continue to grow very quickly. So today he's going to show us how heraldry from medieval connections to modern digital archives lives through his passion. And so let's give a warm welcome to Ralf. You're very welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much also, Antonio, for inviting me a couple of months ago for this. And it's an honor to speak all the way over in Ireland. It's a pity. I like Ireland. I would like to have come there in person. But yeah, this is also a way, of course, to meet. I think I will share my screen, and I presume you'll be able to see this. Now I just have to move the bar a little bit up because otherwise I see nothing. But anyway, my collections, like already was introduced, I am a very vivid collector of physical books on heraldry, specifically in civic and ecclesiastical heraldry. And also have a large collection of all kind of other small items, from really tiny pins to really 40-kilo shields that were placed along the road when you enter a town. This kind of large items that I got gifted from the municipalities. But my largest collection is indeed the Heraldry of the World, what was just stated. And yeah, this, I always say middle of, I don't know exactly when it started, but I always say it's somewhere in the middle of May 1995. So yeah, we're now on the 13th of May, so the middle of May. So I consider that this is indeed the 30th anniversary of the site, as was mentioned. So that's always nice to be able to give a lecture, especially on kind of a birthday of the site. But because I'm a collector, I discussed with Antonio to have really a lecture more on collecting heraldry during the ages. And if you look back on historical collectors, as I would call it, I would start with the guy who made these kind of first armorials, and the most well-known is the armorial of Galra. Then there's, of course, a lot of people who collected items and painted them in all kinds of heraldic manuscripts. Then we have a big collector in France, Rogier, in the late 17th century. Also well known is, for example, the German Siebmacher and the huge number of books that are coming out of his collection. Another countryman for me, Rietstap, the Armorial Général, also from the late 19th century, also a huge collection. Now, more modern, you have me as a collector, and the newest version, and I'm not sure if everybody is aware of this website, is from Heraldic, which is an AI-based program. Now, if you look at the numbers, He already collected about 2,000 arms. Now, the different manuscripts, Hozier had already a lot more. They reached up more. I'm at 302,000, and Heraldic is about 3 million now in his database and collection. So you can say that each of us was a serious collector in the time that he or she, or he actually in all cases, were active. It would be impossible in 1400 in the first one to collect 120,000 arms, if there were any of even 120,000 arms. Looking a little bit more in detail, why these things were done? No, this is Klaas Heineson, and he was the herald for Duke William of Gelre. And around 1400, for his boss, he compiled what is now known as the Armorial Gelre. Later, he moved to the neighboring county, became the herald for Willem of Holland from the House of Bavaria. What you see here is he's wearing also the coat with the arms of Gelre at the time, and I'm streaming this from the town of Renkum, which is in Gelderland, which is the right arms down here. The left one is the one from the village where I live, and the right one is for the province Gelderland, which is actually the even more or less complete successor of Gelre, from where Heinz's son was the herald. So I consider him really like a direct historical ancestor working in the same area, actually in Arnhem, that is 10 kilometers from here, as where I'm sitting now streaming this heraldry. So it's coming back to the same place in that sense. Now, why did he combine all this heraldry? Basically, it was needed for his work. As a herald, he was working obviously in tournaments and had to identify all the participants and this kind of thing. So you can see his work more or less like a medieval who is who of the nobility who was working in, who was participating in tournaments. So where did he get his sources from? Because that's always the biggest issue. Where do you get your sources from? Specifically in pre-digital times, it's very, very difficult. Now, most likely he followed his bosses to the different tournaments and compared notes with all the other heralds that were there from the other competitors. And in the end, he made it's like a reference work for himself, which in the end ended up in this armorial. And there's a few of his colleagues having done the same thing at the same time. Obviously, it was needed for his work. So what he needed was the arms of the rulers and their vessels. And in the top left corner, you see the arms of Gelre, so William of Gelre, and his main vessels. And the one next to him, and I'm not sure if you can see the mouse, but this red one here, that's important because that's the arms of Zuilen, and keep that in mind. The second collector that I would deal with was Hozier, that's him, Charles René d'Hozier. He was kind of working in what we would say the College of Arms of France at the time. That's also his own personal arms, or family arms. And he collected the Armorial Général de la France, and that is a huge number of books and describing a lot of different arms in France at the time. But he was not really a collector out of hobby. It was basically his boss who decided, that was Louis XIV, the King of France, who ran out of money. And he decided that it would be a good idea to raise some kind of tax from everybody who wanted to use a coat of arms. Or, not to say it a little bit differently, everybody who had already a coat of arms was supposed to pay. And the nobility and the towns, etc., were supposed to have a coat of arms. So another way of basically taxing a large part of the society. So they were asked, everybody was asked voluntarily to register the arms. Well, yeah, voluntarily. If you registered, you had to pay. If you didn't, you also had to pay, but then as a fine. So most people had to register. And they also visited the different regions, and the visitations were not done by heralds like in the College of Arms in the UK, but mainly by the tax collectors to see if somebody used arms, and then they were taxed. And if the tax collectors, and specifically the south of France, had the idea that a person or a village or any organization, a church or abbey or whatever, should use arms, they just assigned arms to them. And then you had to pay for the things that you didn't have before, but that were assigned to you. So it was a kind of interesting way of collecting arms, but a rather different way as in the previous one. Nevertheless, there's over 120,000 arms in the Armorial General. Family arms, personal arms, guilds, villages, sometimes really tiny hamlets in the south of France. So even though some of the arms were forced upon the villages, a large number is actually still used in France. So they did accept it in the end. And it's, of course, a huge historical resource for heraldry. The next one is Siepmacher. He is in Germany, but there have been also in the UK and other places, people starting to, as a hobby, basically, to do heraldry. So a different purpose, so no tax, nothing for work. Siepmacher was an etcher, so he was aware of different things regarding heraldry. He had to etch also books and other kind of things with coats of arms. It got his interest, and in the end he started to produce some books, the Wappenbüchlein, the small book of arms. He actually never compiled much himself. It's called the Siepmacher. The books are called the Siepmacher, but they're mostly made by different successors and not by himself, actually. It's still a huge resource for heraldry in mainly the Germanic region. Another hobbyist, let's say, was Johannes Rietstap, and he was a stenographer in the Dutch Parliament. He also published books and journals and different publications on heraldry. He was interested in family arms, and basically he wanted also to have like a bibliography of arms and also a list of charges, so you could easily find, if you saw an image, how to find the appropriate arms and family with it. So he started to collect from all different books and publications and corresponding with fellow heralds. A huge number at the time of 120,000 family arms, but he never managed to make it like a reference work where you could just look up for the blazon and see where it was. But it's still a very valuable resource. And there were more like this, but he is at the time in the 19th century, but he is by far the largest. Now, Heraldry of the World, like I said, I started it, but we have two other people. Marcus Carlson is completely responsible for the military part of the site. Plus he contributes to other parts, and Christoph Hoek is looking for the personal part and also contributes to other things. For us, it's plainly a hobby. It's just something we do for fun. Because I started it, it is focused on non-personal arms, which is my personal interest, obviously. But there is no reason not to include family arms, personal arms, nobility, royalty, etc. The only thing is somebody else has to do it, because I'm not going to do it. So if somebody wants to volunteer to add all to the site, there's space, there's options. I'm just not, well, I need much more time than I have anyway. So I'm not going to expand to things that I don't have time for. Now, obviously, today it's very easy to get information, sometimes too easy to get information, because if I continue like this, I think without having new information, I can still work another 20 years on this. So there's so much available. Contrary to the previous collectors, we also include the backgrounds and the history of the coats of arms. And I see in the list of participants, Lawrence, and he also gave me a lot of information for the UK and Irish heraldry on the site. So thank you for that. We never met in person. Now I see your name here. The last one is from Heraldic, and that is from Evraar van Zuilen van Nijeveld. And here is this, what I said, the Zuilen. He is from a noble family, and this Zuilen is the arms that you saw on the Armorial Gelre next to the arms of Gelre itself. So his arms are still the same as in Armorial Gelre from 1400. He's an AI expert from Belgium, and he developed this identification program and software and you can put in or scan an image of a coat of arms, and it will see in the database using all kind of AI technology to see if it can be identified. And of course, to make that valuable, you have to have a huge database of sources. And he is looking for books, websites. He copied my website, for example, but also Hozier and all the other kind of things, old and new. He goes to people, he visits libraries, churches, everything, and he has now compiled over 3 million pictures in his site. Still, 1 in 3 of my searches when I have something fail, because there's so much more than what he has. But sometimes we get a request on a painting or something, and then you get an answer that fits, which is coming sometimes from a completely different area where you expected it to come from. So it's a very useful resource. So during time, you see that people started to collect for different reasons, for work, for tax, the last one for commercial or for hobby. And I skipped one group, and that is the collectors who started to make the memorials, the heraldic manuscripts, basically. And they're varied in size, they vary in age, and they vary in number of arms, but generally also in style. Some of them are extremely beautiful, some of them are my style of painting, which is kind of very limited, because I started what I was just said. I started painting them myself, but I realized very soon that I'm definitely not a painter. So I gave up on that part. Even though there's quite a lot of them, we knew very little of it. We know what's in there, but we don't know who made them. Very few are actually signed. Who is the author? And very often the author is not the same one as the compiler. A lot of these are compiled of different manuscripts together in a later age, and then in the library seen as a manuscript from 1650, let's say. But a lot of the parts may be way, way older than how it is listed in the library. One thing we can be sure of, the people who made these were well off. Some of them are hundreds and hundreds of pages of drawings. Just to make that, even digitally nowadays, it takes years. So people needed to have quite a lot of spare time. Secondly, the biggest one that we have is 1160 pages thick, so of parchment. So that's also a very expensive hobby. So this was not something that the common person did. People had to be from the high society, either nobility or rich merchants or this kind of things. Surprisingly, if you talk about manuscripts and hand labor, you think generally of monasteries. And although there are a lot of medieval books still in monasteries, very, very few are heraldic. And very often they are not made in the monastery. For example, St. Gallen Abbey or Einsiedeln Abbey in Germany, or in Switzerland. They have huge libraries, lots of memorials, but they're not made in the library. They're just acquired later. Or when they're made there, it's just a list and the genealogy or something about all the previous abbots that they had there. So then it's really connected to the abbey itself. We often don't know from where they are. We know sometimes when it's from the provenance, when it is first appears, or sometimes it's signed, but most often it's just a guess based on style or content, etc. And we have generally no idea where they got their information from. We also have, in a very few cases, no idea why they made it. Sometimes it is commissioned by a king or a lord, but in a large number of cases, we have just no idea why people made these armorials. Most likely because they were just, call it hobbyists, as we say now, but from the high society, that's for sure. There's actually quite a lot of them still. The main expert on this is Sten Clemmensen from Denmark. And his last publication, he said that there were at least 550 armorials still in existence. About 50% nowadays are in digital form, mainly in France and in Germany, but also in other places. but there are many more hidden. I know from Evra van Zuylen that he also visits private libraries in Belgium from noble families, etc. And there's a lot of treasure of armorials and other material available, which are just not known to the general public, let's say. So there's much more hidden. Most of it are only personal arms, which is always interesting to me when I started to look more at the manuscripts, that it is largely devoted to the nobility and sometimes royal and state arms and fanciful arms and some ecclesiastical. But only about 5 has city arms, which was my main field of interest, of course, to look at these. And here two examples. And that's actually very little, because if you look at the number of heraldry books that is published now, I would say it's more or less the other way around. There's not that many books published purely on family arms or nobility, but a large majority that is published now is more on civic or ecclesiastical heraldry. So that has shifted completely in time. But how did these people, let's call it the scientist in me, like how did these people get their information? And nowadays I look it up online and I have my information, it's just a matter of seconds. But at that time, in the 15th, 16th, 17th century, how did they get the information? Tournaments were not that popular anymore, so you didn't go there. Even if you knew that there was an old armorial, so you knew that, let's say, the Bishop of Munich had an armorial, but you lived in the Netherlands, how do you ever get to it? Even if it's known, you don't just travel, you don't take a plane to Munich, have a look and go back. It's a little bit difficult in the 15th or 16th century. So even if it was known, how to get there is difficult. There are some armorials where you can say, okay, people visited the area. For example, they visited churches, looking at the tombstones and obituaries and all this kind of things in the churches, and they collected a lot of information. In the 19th century and nowadays, it's also a lot of correspondence electronically or on paper, but you didn't send around in the 15th century or 16th century information by mail. There was no mail service. Everything had to go by royal courier or this kind of things. It was very, very difficult to have a correspondence with people abroad. Did they meet like in the tournaments somewhere? Yeah, and that one thing where they definitely did meet is the Council of Constance. It's an ecclesiastical meeting in Constance in the south of Germany in the middle of the 15th century. At the time there were 3 popes, and that became a little bit complicated, one in Rome, one in Pisa, one in Avignon in France. So they collected all the bishops and all the clergy in Constance to come to a solution of this. That took a few decades on and off, and at the same time there was also a lot of delegations from royalty, from nobility, sometimes from cities. So it was like a complete melting pot of the European high society. And Stemmens, the Danish guy, he also connected a lot of the armorials based on Constance. So people who've been in Constance copy their armorials, and that he calls the South German or the Constance group. So yeah, there were important meetings, and that can have been used as sources for these armorials. So exchange of ideas and exchange of knowledge. Of course, around 1550, you started to get also printed sources with heraldry in it. And that made it, of course, a lot easier for people all over Europe. Still very expensive books, obviously, but it was a lot easier to spread and to get information. And that was books, pamphlets, posters, genealogical information, pedigrees, etc., what people published. And one of these is, for example, this one. There's a series of these published around 1550, I think, in the south of what is now Belgium. This is the Duchy of Brabant, and on top you see the Dukes of Brabant, and then the cities around it. That's like here. Then here for example, the nobility, and the monasteries, the high nobility, and other family arms, and lower nobility, which is down there. And obviously these things very expensive, but they had a much wider audience than before. And you see that in later publications, very often the arms from this kind of publications are copied. So these have been used a lot as sources, either in color, like this one, or in black and white. If you look at the armorials, yeah, obviously it's a lot of nobility in there, and they're often copied. They're also generally correct. I will come to that later. There's a lot of mistakes in these books. But tracing is harder because you cannot really, you have to take them into a kind of database. It's very difficult to really see which has been copied from what. A tool like Heraldic may help. For example, if you look at the right side, if you put this picture in Heraldic, you might find other armorials showing the same picture. And then you can make still an idea which was copied from which, and is one an original source or one is a copy, this kind of things. So Heraldic may work in this case quite well. As there's less for city arms, and city arms are more easier defined, sometimes looking for sources is easier for city arms, and I will go into that. And of course, the more digital copies are available of armorials, the easier this kind of historical tracing of traceability gets easier. And unfortunately, also much more results in much more questions than when you start out. The most city arms in armorials you see in the quaternions. I don't know if everybody knows what are those, but that was something in the 15th to 16th, 17th century in Germany, or Germanic publications, where they divided the whole German society in the four cities, the four castles, the four villages, the four farmers, the four margraves, landgraves, whatever kind of things, and all the time more or less the same things. And this one is maybe more well known, where you see on each wing a pile, and down you see here the four margraves, the four burgraves, the four freedoms, the four bishops. Everything was divided in four. I have no idea why, but everything was divided in four. And these were copied heavily. And for example, here you see a really strange design on this one. That's this one. And in a later armorial, you see suddenly popping up this one. And this is a strange design. Normally they were rather differently shown. And this one is clearly copied from something that is copied and copied maybe from this one. So if there is a strange arms or mistakes, you can sometimes trace it back more easier than when they are correct, because then that could have had multiple sources. But not taking the quaternions into consideration, what can the city arms tell us about the armorials? Do they give some information on where they were made, on age, or how they were collected, this kind of things? So I did some studies in there, how and why people could collect these things. Now, the time frame was before 1650, it should be colored. At least 10 city arms, it should be a manuscript, so drawn, not printed. And I found only 27 manuscripts. That's still doable. The largest is the manuscript from Windhaak. This is Brussels. I don't know if you can read this properly, but that's sometimes another issue. That has more than 400 city arms. It's the largest. And one of the smallest is, for example, this one that has 22 cities in what is now partly Belgium, partly France, Hainaut. And this is an interesting one because, yeah, from an heraldic point of view, you have here a shield, something standing in front of the shield, and then an inscription on top of that again. It's not really correctly shown here. So what can we learn from this? First of all, where are they from? And that's already interesting, because most of them are from the south of Germany, and that may again give some connection towards this Council of Constance. A large number is also from the region here. It's only one from France. There's a huge number of armorials from France, from 15th, 14th century, but only one French one has city arms in it, and that's rather surprising. One from North Germany, and from 5, we have no clue where they are probably made. We haven't found any from these countries, surprisingly. That doesn't mean they are not there. They could have been that they've never been there. Like in France, obviously, it was not popular to have city arms because there are a lot of armorials, but not with civic heraldry. I'm pretty sure a large number has been destroyed in time. And there's also probably quite a number that we just don't have digital access to, so couldn't include in the studies. On the other hand, in Spain and in France, there's a lot of things digitally available, but just not with city arms. You can plot, that's a good thing from city arms, you can plot them. That's more difficult with family arms. But for city arms, you can plot from each of the armorials where are the cities located. And that gives you already quite a number of clues. Of course, logically combined to the where are the armorials from, you see that in the Netherlands, Belgium, and Germany, you see a large number of towns involved. So more than 75. France as well. But I put it between brackets because they all come from one armorial, but they are listed. From some other countries, we find absolutely nothing yet. From other countries, we find one, Russia between brackets, because in one armorial, it looks like Moscow, but we're not sure. And from Spain, we find only 5 cities, minor cities in 2 armorials. So it, based also where they're from, you see also that it is largely focused on the Central Europe. Okay, that it's not in Norway or in Finland or in the Balkans. There was not so much of a heraldry tradition and probably also not so much of a manuscript tradition at the time. But the UK is rather surprisingly that we didn't find anything there. And also Denmark, south of Denmark, is really in the Germanic sphere. We don't find many things there. The problem, however, that's has been quite a lot of end work sometimes, how to find them. Because a lot of these armorials in archives are not very well described. This one, it is in the Dutch archive here. It's called Armorial with Colored Family Arms. So you don't even think that there are town arms in it because the archive did just make a digital copy, but they just never analyzed what's actually in it. It's the 16th century and there's still 52 cities in it, even though it's stated only family arms. And you see here, it's largely from the south of the Netherlands and Belgium, with the 2 outliers on top. Very likely here, this is from a noble family from that area. They just got their information from local sources. When it's a very limited geographical distribution, people talked around, they may have traveled around and just collected the things this way. They probably never copied it from some older manuscript. But here in the previous one, they are at least all combined in one part of the manuscript. This one, this is the biggest one, the 1165 pages. So it's a big book. It's a very large file also. It's in France, it's listed as 16th century. And it is listed as the arms of a region, in this case Burgundy, and then all kind of families that are listed, or counties also, in that region. And then suddenly in Holland, there appear city arms, Amsterdam here and Delft, a number, and then somehow somewhere in Flanders there's just this one. Only one town, Dendermonde, not a typical big town. It just appears in all of these pages, and altogether you get then this. So there are 23 in Hainaut, that is this part. A few in the Netherlands, they're all main trading cities. And then 2 Ostende is then a big trading city, and then this small village in Dendermonde. Why that is included, no idea. But probably it's a French manuscript. So this is French-speaking part of Belgium. So maybe that is why they're included there. This one is also interesting. It's the oldest. That is from 1460. It's in the Brussels library. It's originating also from the Brussels Antwerpen area, so this area. So most likely this has been compiled by somebody working in the city hall or in the court or something like that, and has been talking to people around that visited the court and found and then compiled all the town arms in that region. It's quite logical. There are some bishoprics like Köln and Basel that were well known. Rome is also in there, for example. And then there's this, Melun. Why suddenly is there Melun? That was a tiny village. It's a little bit less important than Paris, I would say. So why would that have been included? Now, the only thing I can imagine is that just this person who was collecting this, let's call it in the city hall, had a visitor from that area and just included town arms in it. Because there's no logical reason why that specific town is added. It's also sometimes very difficult if these outliers, this is readable and the arms also are still the same for Milan, so it's easy to find. But sometimes if it's not readable, you start to look in this armorial in this area and you're not going to look all the way there. So sometimes it's difficult to identify things. This is also an interesting one. This is the French one. So this is the one for France. All the French main cities are there. This part is missing, the Alsace, because at that time that was German. So it's not included in the armorial at all. Has simple ones, but even also ones with supporters, etc. This is Béthune, which is not very common. Most cases, the family arms, they have helmets and crests and supporters, but the town arms generally are shown only as a shield. So this is one of the exceptions. And suddenly there are 3 towns in South Spain. Why? No idea. These are not major towns. Jaén, this one is a little bit bigger. These are 2 small towns next to Jaén, really far, far from there. The rest, the whole book is French. But why 3 Spanish arms there? No idea. Can't find no logical explanation for that. There's also part of Swiss arms that you can see here. That's a nice clear cluster, except I don't know where he got it from, but he kind of messed it up, because this is Bienne and this is Neuchâtel. However, the names are, this is the arms of Neuchâtel and this one of Bienne. So the names very often in these manuscripts do not fit the town itself. A lot of these things are kind of made quite sloppy, so to say. And for dating, there's an interesting one here. This is the town of Rottweil, which is in Germany, but it's in the Swiss cluster. And it was associated to Switzerland from 1563 to 1519. So if it's included here, even though the manuscript is updated until 1600, these town arms are either collected or from another source from probably nearly a century older. Because why would somebody take this town of Rottweil as part of the Swiss Confederation in, let's say, 1560? They probably have done that before 1519 or 1520 at the latest, and not before 1463. So sometimes these outliers or single town arms can give you a better indication when a collection has been compiled. This one is an interesting one also. This is from 1514. It's dated. It's also known who wrote it, Hermann Bote. It's now in Braunschweig, in north of Germany. And he was obviously interested in the Hansa, the Germanic Hanseatic League. Because nearly all these towns, with a few exceptions, are members of the Hansa. But he probably asked the merchants what their town arms looked like, but that created in a lot of mistakes. This should be silver on red. This should be a red field with a silver castle. This is Hamburg. Visby in Sweden, that fits then, and this is Riga. Now that took some time to identify. The town it's not easy to read, and also the colors and so on are off. So there's a lot of mistakes in this one, and that's an indication that it's just not copied from something original, but coming from hearsay. Oh, I met somebody from, let's say, Anclam. He said, yeah, our arms look like this, and he made that image of picture, but it's not always very accurate. And that's why sometimes a real challenge to figure out what is what. But very clear why he did this and probably also how he got it. We have no idea of this one. This is the largest. It's not only the town arms, it also has a lot of ecclesiastical arms, and these can be traced to the Council of Constance again. But if you look at the towns represented, there are way more than have been represented in the Constance Council. And there are some really strange ones in there. He also used probably a lot of different sources, because if you look at the naming, which is a disaster in this book, sometimes it's Latin. This is Rouen in France, and they use a Latin name. So that's not, sometimes it's a local name, sometimes it's a Latin name. Now, Amsterdam, it's obviously not a Dutch source, and also the colors are off here. That should be really different colors. Rijssel, or Lille now in France, was bilingual at the time. So having the Dutch name here is something like that, that our source could be more from a Dutch area. However, the arms should be a silver fleur-de-lis on red. So the colors are really off. And then there, you can say, okay, they're from trading, or people met, or they were in the Council of Constance. And then there's towns like this, Grolle, Grol, Groenlo nowadays. It's a very small town. At the time, it had maybe 500 people in the east of the Netherlands. It was just a fortress. It had no trading. How does this end up in this collection? You start to wonder. This is not a town that sent a delegation somewhere or whatever. It also doesn't appear in any of the comparative Dutch books at the time. So how he got that one, for example, is very strange. This one took also some time. Gestria. Now, what could that be? But if you change the G to a CH, then it becomes Chester. And this is the only British one that we ever found in a memorial. It's also the only British one in this whole memorial. Why not London? Why not Birmingham, Manchester, other big towns? But why only Chester? No idea. It's in that sense, it's a manuscript with a lot of strange things. And then a lot of some are missing. We can't read what it says here because there's so many mistakes in colors. We have no clue if the lion is indeed gold on black. It could easily be silver on blue. So there's still a lot of them missing. Now, sometimes you see the same cluster. In Hainaut, in France, Dutch-French, of Belgian-French border nowadays, there are 6 manuscripts showing the same 23 cities. So that looks like, hey, they're all copied from each other like a single cluster. However, if you look at Halle, one of the towns, all the 6 manuscripts have a completely different version of the town of Halle. Maybe not all fully completely, these are quite similar, but they're definitely not copied from each other. So it's a small cluster. It is shown up in 6 manuscripts, and in all manuscripts, they are different. So maybe they still have had contacts with the cities all the time. This is what you would expect. Okay, this is copied from each other. Obviously, it's not. So it's quite interesting. But still asking more questions, how did they get their information? This is the opposite. This is a German one, the Schaffhausenes Wappenbuch. From dated 1475-1500, and this is Armorial de Ribeaupierre, which is in France. And it's a little bit younger, and if you look carefully, there is a lot of overlap. They're actually the same. A few clusters here more in the newer version, and there's one missing from the old version, but otherwise the sequence in the armorials is identical for 90%. So this is clearly copied from each other. Then you would say this one is copied from that, but that's not correctly true. The same towns, the same sequence, but the images are not the same. And they also have a lot of family arms, which are also not the same. So if one would have copied from the other, also the family arms, you would have a large consistency in the drawings. There is not. So here you can say, here there is clearly, these are both based on an older source, which probably has been destroyed or has not been found yet. These 2 armorials are in completely different countries. They have a completely different provenance. So people would never have connected them with each other. But on the city arms, they're basically identical. Another interesting thing that you often see is in this one from Jörg Rügen. That's just fully digitalized this year in Innsbruck. So it's very recent. He never finished it. So you have very interesting things on the arms of the eagles. Some have already a beak here, and some are like, very incorrected, of incomplete as such. And he has a large fantasy. This is one that is so unreliable also on the ecclesiastical part in it. If he just didn't know anything, he just made up something. So this is the arms of Brussels, which has always been St. Michael killing a dragon, not this lion with the chief. And this is Lier in Belgium, that normally has 3 chevrons, all the time has since 14th century, never had a red. Why a red is also something completely different, because the town is Lier, written in French. It has nothing to do with reds or whatever. So why this red was chosen? They like it in Lier. They just the mayor was quite interested in this town. He ordered the archive to have a look if there's anything found in their archive. They never found anything with reds there. So this is just something that's made up. If you would see another one afterwards with a red, then you can easily say, oh, it's copied from. But in this case, it's unique. Another interesting one that we did a little bit more work on, it's a Dutch one. At least it's in the Netherlands. And it has 120 city arms, and it's seen by the archive as it has been assembled. There are clearly different handwritings, different books in it. So we don't know who assembled it, but they asked me to have a look, like, do you have any idea where these arms are from? No, that's easy. They're mainly from Holland and a bit of abroad. And from when is it? And where do they get their sources from? And actually, when you analyze it, it's a very interesting one. This is the distribution. This is the South German distribution. It has a few Hanseatic cities and a lot of bishoprics in Germany. So that's quite clearly where he got his sources from. But the non-Dutch part is clearly not finished. So you cannot say any conclusions because you don't know what is still missing there. So we're looking more at the Dutch-Belgian ones, and there you see two things. First of all of them are in the Dutch-speaking area. This is the French-speaking area of Belgium, and this was the whole Dutch-speaking area. So it clearly has a Dutch-speaking source. Also includes the cities here in France, in the south of France, or in the north of France, French Flanders. If it's a Dutch source, the book is in Dutch, it probably dates before 1550, because then this part was no longer part of the Netherlands, and newer sources just don't mention these French cities anymore. So you assume that it's pre-1550. But you also see, if you look carefully on all what is now the Dutch arms, it's the largest collection of Dutch city arms from the 1600s. We don't have any other publication where so many arms are used. So, and definitely no combination between the north and the south. So in that sense, probably there are 2 sources, one for the Flanders part and one for the North Dutch part. It has been published after these were made. So if you look in detail on this one, you see Brabant and 3 town arms, Halen, Geldenaker, Jordange, and Hanut. And if you look in the memorial, you see Hanut is the same. And these are different. It's also not just difficult to make on these 2. But here you see, yes, there are 2 lions. Okay. And here there's a lion and 2 castles. This is a lion and some kind of blob. There's definitely not a castle. So this is not clearly copied from a publication like these. If you then look at older armorials from the same region, you see that they're all older, have the same arms as this one. And the same for this one, where you see the 2 castles very clearly in 1460. So these are not copied from these, and they're also not copied from there. So where does he get his information from? No idea. And they're all kind of unique. They're not similar to any of the other manuscripts or publications, written or published, that we know. Very strange one is this one, Valenciennes in the north of France. It's a swan, but the arms have always been, still are, a golden lion in red. So where does this swan suddenly come from? And you see the swans here already, and it comes from Val de Cygne, Valley of the Swans, as a nickname where the name of Valenciennes maybe could come from. But it's never used in the arms or the seals or any publication of the town. But we do see it on maps in the 1600s and even up to 1708. We see the swan coming for this city. The interesting is, this is the oldest depiction of the swan, and all of these are from the north of the country, from what is now called the Netherlands. They were never used in what at the time the southern Netherlands, so Belgium, or in French Flanders. So this indicates that this is clearly a North Dutch source that was used here. And that's quite strange in this whole collection. And there are two that also indicate a very older source. This is Saftingen, which was supposed to be here. This is Holland, this is Belgium. This is drowned, flooded in 1570. I found it also in another memorial as the city of Saftingen, Stad Saftingen. However, it was just a castle. It's never been a city, so that is already a little bit bigger. And there's this one, Oostende, which is not the Belgian city of a similar name. It's listed in North German towns, North Dutch towns, but it was a city. Not a city, it was a castle in a city, and it was destroyed in 1521. So if you take these two combined, you can definitely say that there has been a source for the southern part, because both are in the south, of early 16th century. Because why would you put this one, which of a castle that was destroyed in 1521, later in the memorial? So that has been a way, way older source than they thought originally. Looking at the northern Netherlands, all these are fine. They're still used by all these cities. There's only one exception, that's this one, Helmond, which is supposed to look like this, a helmet. And it has been like that and still is since the 13th century, a helmet. So why three pails for this town? Very, very unique, I thought. But looking at all the other memorials, there's another one that shows this one. So then you look, hey, this is a mistake. Does it come from this one? So we look at this one. And this is from 1558. And then you see like a cluster here. It's typically made there, probably also visited all the towns, etc. But it's not used as a source for the previous one, because only this one is in alignment, and all the other things, there's no overlap. So this weapon of this Arms of Helmond, which is really different, where does that come from? We have no idea. So it's still open question. The more you know, the more you compare, the more questions you get. That's the frustrating part of this kind of thing. Another small part of this, because this manuscript is really, really interesting for the Dutch history. This is Belgium. This is the Netherlands. For indication, Brugge, Bruges is here actually. And this was the harbor of Bruges in the 14th century. That was all water here. It was an area with the most cities in Europe. This is about 25 kilometers from east to west, and there's 16 towns with city rights. There has never been, there's nowhere, anywhere in Europe, so many small cities at a short place. However, most of these, two of them, most of these were flooded. Sorry, 8 of these were flooded. 2, we know from historical sources a lot of different things. The whole archives are there, so these are well known. But this for the Dutch history is very, very interesting suddenly, because there are 6 towns. They're all flooded. There were cities, very, very tiny, but they're listed as cities in Flanders. They paid taxes, they had walls, etc. They're all flooded in the late 14th century. And this manuscript mentions the arms of these. And the manuscript is actually pretty accurate. So probably these were the arms of these towns, but they're just not known from any other historical source, either at seals or in manuscripts or in charters or in whatever. So analyzing these things, you sometimes come to things that are very, very interesting locally. Now, so what does this study then give you? Very few manuscripts actually have arms. We still don't know how many are there. They're clustered in Germanic lands, and we have no idea what the sources actually are. And most of them look like individual, just hobby collectors. So why they were included, what are the sources? We still have a lot of answers to go here. And maybe more AI programs, etc., will give you some ideas. Now, looking them further, all the time you had these private collectors. These are memorials that we just stated. But heraldry collecting was very, very small scale. Until in the 19th century, somebody got an idea which we now call branding or marketing or advertising. That was not done before. And one of the first to do this was Stolwerk in Germany. You put a picture in your package of chocolate, and people like to collect that, and people buy your chocolate more. Marketing. And they started with a lot of different things, including also, these are from the 1870s, including also some with an heraldic topic. A lot of other companies followed that. And in the UK and in America, you got mainly cigarette cards. In Germany, it was a lot of chocolate and sweets. And also, for example, this is a Danish one. This idea of marketing and also using heraldry, a lot of other topics, obviously, as well, suddenly gave a whole new idea for collecting. Not just high nobility who did something like this, the common people started to collect heraldry. So there's hundreds of these series, even up to series from Uruguay, not necessarily only Europe. And this is an idea from the variety of some of the English tobacco cards that you have, with a lot of different designs and ideas. Become very popular. Then somebody got the idea, you can also put this in albums. So, and not only one brand, but somebody had the idea, okay, we print these cards with 2 arms on it, and small companies can put their advertising there. And that was a kind of new idea. And this is a German one, this is a Dutch one, and this is from Austria-Hungary, I think. Anyway, this is the first multinational series. In 8 different countries, these were printed, and people could collect them in 6 different versions of this album. So not only from one company like your own cigarette cards, but from whole different things. These must be thousands and thousands of, maybe even millions of these cards may have been printed. So on a huge scale, people started to collect things. Similar idea as this one, this series. I don't know if anybody ever saw them. Again, oh, what did I do now? Yeah. A common design, but with a lot of different companies and a lot of different formats, different sizes. Italy, US, Poland, everywhere they were. There are 50 designs, but most of these series, like here, were issued in sets of 6. So most companies use only 48. But I have cards of these, I have more than thousands of these from different countries. So really multinational series. Besides paperwork, around 1900, crested China got very popular in the UK. There are maybe 50,000 of this kind of things, starting with small vases and then ending up in things like birds and thrones and minesweepers and all kind of different ideas with the arms printed on it. And the same arms were also printed on postcards. These are the Yaya tobacco postcards. And if there was no arms for a town, they just made up something, or they used a local lord or whatever. And because of this strange things like this local lords, you can see also that they were using the same arms on different things, because they are not normal, not logical. So a whole different range of collecting things than in the 19th century. So the 19th century, hardly anything. And then suddenly it boomed with heraldry on the weirdest items and ideas. And it got large. This is the German publication. It's a box. This is not a book, it's a box with loose sheets in it. where you could buy these sheets and then put them on paper sheets again. And it has over 8,000 stamps. So this was, even at the time, there were only a few cents each plate, but they are really, really expensive to collect. But things got big. Got even bigger with the Coffee Hach. They took it to a whole new level. It's a German caffeine-free company, and they issued albums, and most of you may have seen them, all over Europe. France, Austria, Sweden, Denmark, Yugoslavia, different countries, all with the different arms in it. That was not unique. There's a lot of albums with collecting stamps, in this case from coffee. But they took it to a new level. These are how you could collect them. But there were coupons for it. There were sheets where you could sign in how much, which one you had and which one you missed, and you could send it to the company. They made agendas. They made menus. They made, in the Netherlands, 3 national competition for children how to draw municipal arms from their collection. And if you won as a child, you got even this book. They issued also books. The Dutch, we have a name of being, well, keen on money, let's say, in that sense. The French are better. They also issued a contest in France, but there you could win a car. A big new Renault. In Holland, you could win a book. In France, you could win a car. They had obviously a little bit more money to spend. Just by drawing arms, you could win a car. That's something new. And in a lot of other things, this is a coffee can, tiles, I don't know what else I have with them. They used games, children games, all kind of things. They used the arms. So they took heraldry in that sense to a completely new range of applications. Now, not only the albums, but also other things. Worth a study by itself. After the war, it kind of collapsed again. Most of the collections things were pre-1940. Germany continued with giving albums. Also a Dutch album from later. This is a modern one from, I think, around 2000, a Spanish one. I don't know if Antonia knows it, from the Basque area. And this is one from Venezuela, for example, from the 1960s. So there have been albums, etc., used in time for collecting, mainly by children. Now then, there's a lot of other kind of things that can be collected and were issued really not as souvenirs, but as collecting items. 900 of these sticker postcards from France, 500 of Cistercian abbeys, etc. Cigar bonds that were just not used on cigars, but just printed for collectors, mainly in Belgium, Holland, and Spain. Coffee creamer cups. This is a hobby typically for Switzerland. And there are about 20 series of heraldic town arms on coffee creamer cups. Sugar packages, also teaspoons, all this kind of things. A whole range of things what people do and could collect and were just issued like these, specifically for collectors or like these, not just for use, but really specifically for collecting. Now, how to continue? We've seen from books, hobbyism, to a whole range of other things, up and down. Maybe it goes up again, but what can we expect to collect after 2030? Maybe AI generated heraldry items? Well, AI should get a little bit better in heraldry than it is right now. Generally, it's still kind of a mess, to say quietly. Maybe we can collect heraldic holograms, this kind of things. They do already exist, but not really as collecting items. Maybe after 2030, does my site still exist? Can I still collect something? Will it be different? I have no idea. So we've done a lot of things have changed in time, but what the future will bring us in heraldry and heraldry collecting specifically, I have no idea. And with this, I would like to finish my lecture and give the word back to the chairman, unless people have questions, obviously.
Thank you very much, Ralf.